James O'Keefe is showing some new videos right now, showing the underbelly of Democrat and progressive politics. What comes to mind as you watch what you're seeing?
Well, first of all, I think what's really fascinating about the James O'Keefe video, which has the two people discussing how they are going to cause disruptions at Trump rallies and try to get the media to blame Trump. This was an official action of the Democratic Party through its surrogates to publicly disrupt the activities of the Republican Party and a Republican candidate. Now, I happen to believe that since they were inciting violence, that they committed crimes. And I believe that there were both state and federal crimes. First of all, they were interfering with a federal election, I think, and they were purposely trying to create violence. I think on its face, the tapes that we have seen show evidence of not only criminal intent, but actual criminal activity. And I think there should be federal investigations and state investigations of all the people on those videos. They should subpoena all of their records of payment, who was involved, how it was known. I'm not holding my breath, given this United States Justice Department, which is the most political and politically corrupt in history. But anybody with an ounce of brains will see that this was not Dick Tuck doing a prank on a train, putting alcohol in somebody's drink instead of water. This was somebody trying to injure people, trying to create violence where innocent bystanders would be injured, property might be destroyed. These are crimes, and it needs to be dealt with that way. That tape is absolutely prima facie evidence of criminal activity, and it needs to be investigated. And I haven't heard a peep out of the United States Justice Department. They continue to embarrass me as a former United States attorney and a former senior Justice Department official. I'm embarrassed by Loretta Lynch and her conduct of the business of the Department of Justice. And of course, very embarrassed by the director of the FBI, who ought to have FBI agents all over this right now. But of course, he's too busy explaining why he didn't investigate Hillary. I don't know what James O'Keefe's next video is that's coming out, but I understand it's going to be a doozy, and I'm looking forward to viewing it.
There's more and more people calling for Hillary Clinton to be locked up on the campaign trail. And you wonder, when you look at James Comey agreeing not to prosecute her, when you look at the Republican Congress not getting accountability for the IRS scandal or the lies told in Benghazi, or any host of things, what do you see?
I think James Comey, the director of the FBI, has done a grave disservice to the country and to the FBI and to the Department of Justice. He conducted a fake investigation. He made believe he was seriously looking into it. And then he held a news conference, which was nothing more basically than an announcement. He didn't take any questions and gave an explanation, laid out the evidence which clearly showed she had violated the law, and then he gave an explanation as to why he didn't think she did, which was sophomoric. And then he went up on Capitol Hill and tried to provide answers which were even more sophomoric. By doing what he did, he created a double standard of justice. He disparaged the quest for fairness and justice in the FBI and the Department of Justice. He created a false narrative. You cannot conduct an investigation of a classified information breach without a grand jury. He didn't use a grand jury. He didn't issue a single subpoena. They did not get a single search warrant. In his final report, which he shared with Congress, he bemoaned the fact that they couldn't get certain things. And the answer was, well, why didn't you impanel a grand jury and issue subpoenas for all those things you couldn't get? He gave an explanation which made it look like he thought the American people were stupid, that they wouldn't understand that his explanation was ludicrous. And in fact, his explanation is so unbelievable that the people inside the Bureau and outside, especially former senior FBI officials, believe that he's a dirty cop. They believe that he threw this case. They believe that he purposely decided not to investigate it legitimately because he didn't want to be the person responsible for recommending the prosecution of the first female nominee of a major party for president. He made a political decision. And for him to sit there and say, they did it this way because it could be done faster. You don't do an investigation like this for speed. You do it for thoroughness. And if the investigation has to continue till after the election, then so be it. He has now said that this would have been the result no matter how long it took. And so it was better to get it over with sooner. He's dead wrong. Nobody knows what the outcome of a legitimate investigation of her would be. But based on the public record, there is absolutely no doubt that she committed multiple crimes along with her staff involving the handling and the disposal and the communication of classified information. He said during the hearings, well, we couldn't prove intent. What did he think was the intent of setting up a private server in the basement of a home in Chappaqua, New York, for the conduct of all government business of the Secretary of State, where there was no encryption and that all the devices that were using that server were unencrypted and unprotected? I mean, his explanations are beyond sophomoric. I mean, I sat there and watched him testify on Capitol Hill and bemoan the fact that people were second-guessing him, where the only thing a legitimate investigator would be able to do is second-guess everything he did. So, I mean, I just think Congress should pass a resolution of no confidence in the director of the FBI as soon as they return, whether it's for lame duck or non-lame duck. I don't believe that the United States should have someone like James Comey at the head of the FBI. I share the views of people inside and outside the Bureau that he is a dirty cop. This is not the way a director of the FBI conducts themselves. He's a dirty cop. And as I said the other day, there's one thing that a prosecutor hates worse than a criminal, and that's a dirty cop.
So you have made a lot of these statements also in the past, and it seems as if you're talking to people on the inside. So what's the likelihood of whistleblowers coming out, of people resigning out of protest?
I don't think anyone will resign. I think most people nowadays don't view resignation as anything other than a way to sort of do, they're not interested in making that kind of statement. I do think some people, and at least one person has already retired early. We know who that person is, and people are talking to that person about coming forward. There are people in the Bureau who are so saddened by this, and they consider their professional careers to have been tainted by what Comey did and their involvement in it. One of the things, to give you an example, Comey at his congressional testimony said that it was a unanimous decision not to prosecute her. That was an absolute lie. In fact, according to people inside the FBI, it was almost unanimous to prosecute her or recommend a prosecution. The only thing that was unanimous, except for Comey, was that she should be stripped of all her clearances. Everybody involved in the investigation believed that she should no longer hold clearances to handle classified information. This is, I think what's going to happen is some of the former people want to be subpoenaed. Congress, the House Judiciary Committee, Chairman Chaffetz and others will get these people by subpoena, and they'll be able to do this. There's not enough time between now and the election to conduct an investigation like this. But it is safe to say that without any doubt whatsoever, that the disconcert inside the Bureau at his public explanations and discussions is pretty awful. One of the things that they do talk about, for example, is on September the 7th, he sent out a memo 2 months after his famous news conference where he had taken all kinds of criticism. He sent a 2-page memo to the FBI staff that was so juvenile in its tone and content that some of the people in the Bureau did not believe originally that it had come from the director. They thought it was that somebody had hacked into the system and issued it in his name. When they found out that it was in fact a memo to the entire FBI, all FBI employees, there was a sigh of disbelief inside the agency. If people haven't seen it, they should go online, Comey memo to FBI employees, September the 7th, read it. They will not believe it came from an FBI director. As I said to somebody after I read it, this is not your mother's FBI.
When you heard Donald Trump say something at the second presidential debate that if he was in power, she would be in jail, what came to mind?
I think he was making a bit of a humorous point, at the same time an important point, which was there was a double standard of justice. Certainly, he was correct when he said, if I'm elected, I'll have my Attorney General appoint a special prosecutor to look into the matter. Now, I didn't say he was going to lock her up. He did exactly the right thing. I'll ask my Attorney General to appoint a special counsel to investigate this matter, which the Attorney General has the authority to do under Department of Justice regulations. I heard him saying what I think a lot of people are saying, that there's a double standard of justice in this country now as a result of what Comey did and the way he did it, and that's one for the Clintons and one for the little guy.
There's a lot of discussion that what's happening in our election is being influenced by Russia.
The New York Times gets stolen classified documents from the Pentagon, from Daniel Ellsberg. Nobody cares. It's great. Let's print it. Now, all of a sudden, because Julian Assange is doing something and the Russians may have been involved in hacking, you know, if the Russians were able to hack into John Podesta's email and into Hillary Clinton's email server and into the Department of State, guess what? Let's man up, guys, and get a better system to fight them. If we can't fight them, we got a real problem. If the Russians are beating us and protecting our information, I think that tells us about the quality of our leadership. The truth is, this is the Democrat media. It's all they are. They're just a cheering section for the Democrats and for Hillary Clinton. The notion that somehow the Russians are influencing this election is ludicrous. They may very well be responsible for the hacks and have given them to Julian Assange, but the press doesn't want that information? Would they rather not have it? I thought their job was to get the news and print it. Now they're all upset because these may be purloined documents. Give them back. Don't write about it. Because, of course, they can't do that anymore because the new media, the social media, the media that exists without the corrupt influence of the Democratic Party, liberalism, and progressivism, isn't bound by those strictures. And Julian Assange, for all of his problems, he's a vessel. What's the big deal? I mean, you know, nobody thought Daniel Ellsberg was a goof, such a great guy because he stole the Pentagon Papers and, you know, gave them to the New York Times.
For those who are not keeping up with all the emails that are coming out and the dump of information in this chaotic time, and we're taping right before the next and the last presidential debate, what should most Americans know about what's coming out that they're too busy doing their life to know?
The important part to know is that the Clintons believe in one thing, themselves. They could care less about the American people. They could care less about the conduct of American government. These used to be the so-called good government people. Democrats used to think they were the good government people. They are now the bad government people. They are the people who gave us a weaponized IRS against 501c4s. They gave us a corrupt Department of State. They gave us people in the Department of State shilling for the Clinton Foundation and directing foreign policy in exchange for donations. It's a pretty ugly picture, and that's what they'll find in these emails. Well, what they should know is that just about everything that they believe has now been confirmed about the way the State Department was conducted by Hillary Clinton and about the way United States foreign policy was conducted by the presidents of the United States. A lot of deceit, a lot of lying, a lot of duplicity, all of that not to our enemies, but to the American people. And what's fascinating about the dump of the emails recently is it shows that people inside the Department of State, particularly Patrick Kennedy, who was the Undersecretary of State for Administration. He's not a political appointee. He is a civil servant. He was instrumental in trying to prevent the classification of emails at their legitimate high level. He was actually trying to get emails declassified down to a lower level so they could not be disclosed. This is an example of how everything that the Clintons touch they corrupt, whether it's the State Department, whether it's charitable giving through a foundation, or whether it's the FBI, the premier law enforcement agency of the world. Whatever the Clintons touch, they have what I call, instead of the golden touch, they have the lead touch. Whatever they touch turns to molten lead, disgusting, creaky, foul-smelling, molten lead. And so what the American people need to do is, it's really worth some time before the election to read some of the emails. They don't have to read them all, but if they go online and check out some of the great writing that's being done about what is in these emails, it will all be delivered up to them. And believe me, all they have to do is click on Clinton emails, latest dump, and bingo, they'll get so many stories that they won't have to waste any time actually reading the emails themselves.
Do you want to talk about quid pro quos that you saw in the emails?
I do. It's very important to realize, and this again relates back to Jim Comey, the FBI director, and what a horrible job he did of, quote, investigating the Clinton email scandal and the related Clinton Foundation scandal. The quid pro quos were so bad that it was fairly obvious to anybody who worked in the State Department, especially the civil servants, that things were going on that shouldn't be going on. In other words, people were asking for meetings after they had given large donations to the Clinton Foundation. And there were emails that showed that the Clinton Foundation were talking to the Department of State people about the fact that these donations had been made and people wanted meetings. Now, some of the Democrats say, well, that's just regular business. No, it's not. That's not the way any other Secretary of State has ever conducted business. People didn't have to pay a Secretary of State's foundation to get a meeting with the Secretary of State. It's really quite pathetic. But here's the worst one. This is the worst and the best one of all. Bill Clinton never, ever spoke to a company called Ericsson in Sweden. It's a very large telecom company. It's a huge multi-billion-dollar company that sells telecommunications all over the world. They had some equipment that they were afraid was going to be placed on a list of the Secretary of State that would make it illegal to sell all over the world. So what did Ericsson do? While that decision was pending, they invited Bill Clinton for the first and only time to come to Ericsson in Sweden and give a speech for $750,000. Never saw him again, and then a couple of weeks later, the list comes out and Ericsson's not on the list. Now, James Comey doesn't think there's much to that. He thinks that's just an accident, that that's just the way business gets done. And it's why, by the way, that Comey's credibility is so low right now, not only within the Bureau, but outside the Bureau. But that's the kind of thing that went on at the State Department, this link of money with the Clintons, public policy, quid pro quo, you give, you get. You give, you get. And if you don't give, you don't get. It was, in fact, the single most corrupt Department of State in the history of the country. If one were to look at the way Bob McDonnell was handled by the Obama Justice Department and the U.S. Attorney's Office in Virginia, and you look at the way Hillary Clinton was handled, you see such a dichotomy and a double standard that it's unbelievable. Bob McDonnell may have done things that were sleazy, that were not the things that I would do if I were governor, but they were clearly not illegal. They were legal under Virginia law, and they were unseemly, to say the least. What Hillary Clinton did was endanger the lives of Americans all over the world, and sources and methods, human sources and methods who cooperated with us. She compromised drone strikes. She compromised the names of agents overseas. She compromised ongoing operations by using an unsecured server. She shared the names of people outside of government, the names of sources and methods outside of government with Sidney Blumenthal and people of his ilk. The comparison between McDonnell and the way he's been treated and Hillary Clinton, who's been basically lionized because she got caught, but she got away with it. I mean, her contribution to the public discourse about equal justice under the law is she got away with it. Now maybe that'll be on her epitaph when she's finally buried. That'll say, born X, died X, she got away with it. You know, she had a getaway car. It was called the United States.
There was also evidence of media collusion in a way that we hadn't seen before. What did you think?
Most American people do believe and understand and know for a fact that the major American media are left of center. They're liberal. They call themselves progressive now, but they're liberal and even worse. They are basically Democrats. A report that was issued today showed that 96% of all donations from journalists went to the Democrats in this election cycle. So, I mean, the notion that these folks can be fair and objective is nonsensical. In fact, I told Frank Fahrenkopf the other night at a dinner that if I were a candidate, I would say you can take your debates and shove them. We're not coming because anybody you're going to have as a moderator is already corrupted and is so biased that there's no way you can have a fair moderation. And of course, all you have to look is the emails from John Harwood of CNBC, where he was bragging about how he was going to be pro-Hillary and anti-Republican. I mean, they don't even care anymore. There's not even a pretense among the people in the media. And of course, this year, because they find Trump to be a sort of an existential threat to man, to the existence of man on the earth, they're even worse because now they believe they have a moral imperative to be against the Republican candidate. Now, they would be against the Republican candidate no matter who it was. I mean, first of all, just think of this. This nice man runs for president called Mitt Romney. He's a Mormon. He has a family. He's never allegedly had an affair. He has one wife. He has a bunch of kids. They're all nice. The Democrats decide they're going to demonize him because he put his dog on the top of his car, and they allege that some employees died of his because they didn't have proper coverage. They died of cancer. The Democrats don't care about the integrity of the political process or the honesty of the public debate. They care about winning. They care about money. They care about power. And that's why the American media is of no value anymore. And it's why their numbers in polling about the regard in which they are held is now below lawyers and Congress. And speaking as a lawyer, I'm happy to have somebody below me for a change.
Do you want to say anything about the email that came out from WikiLeaks about the Foreign Agent Registration?
Well, what's interesting about the Foreign Agents Registration Act, it was passed by Congress after World War I to prevent foreign governments from having undue influence on American policy, public opinion, laws. And so they made people who represent foreign governments and foreign companies have to register as foreign agents. In the course of doing so, they have to reveal all their activities. Now, foreign companies and foreign countries may not give money to in American elections, to anybody or anything. However, their lobbyists and agents who work for them in the United States and are registered are free to give as much money as they want. And so what these companies do is, and these countries, they up the salaries of their agents, and their agents give the money in their stead. And when this issue was raised with John Podesta and others, they said, look, this can get pretty risky. We know it's these agents, these Americans, these registered agents who are representing these foreign governments and companies, but it is legal, although it's pretty smelly. Should we do it? And the unanimous answer was, take the money. This was the high level of ethical consideration done by this State Department and by the Clinton folks in and out of government. The niceties and the distinctions about which countries and how and which one was worse and better were all lost in the one and only thing that the Clintons are very good at, getting the money. And when it came down to not doing something or doing something to get the money, the Clintons do what they always did. They took the money.
Chelsea Clinton hired a consultant to do a good governance review of the Clinton Foundation, and that got popped out.
Well, I think what's interesting about the good governance analysis was that it showed that there wasn't any good governance at the Clinton Foundation, that it was fatally flawed, that its management was improper, that they weren't following the rules and regulations, not only of the IRS, but of New York State and all the other states where they were doing business. Certainly weren't following the rules of foreign countries. And in fact, there's a tremendous bit of writing, if people are interested, about how bad the management of the Clinton Foundation was and is, and the Clinton Global Initiative. Besides reading these emails about that, they should read the works of a gentleman named Charles Ortel, O-R-T-E-L. Charles is one of the most famous Wall Street financial analysts. And for the last 5 years, he has been deconstructing the Clinton Foundation filings in New York and around the world, and has written a series of pieces that are simply stunning and revelatory of just how bad the Clinton Foundation has been run. And while that recent email done by this outside law firm as a report to Chelsea basically said things are pretty bad here, you better clean it up or you're going to get in a lot of trouble, the analysis by Charles Ortel is so much better because he gets into the weeds, but he explains it in layman's terms, and so I recommend that people do that. But that memorandum from the outside law firm just shows how much people didn't care, especially the Clintons. The Clintons didn't care about the management, they cared about the money. When you look at the percentage that goes into charity from there, it's unbelievable. It's like 6% or 7%. The rest is for first-class airfares, private jets, hotels. They have enough staff to sink the Bismarck. I mean, I'm not quite sure who they're helping. Haiti, of course, is the best example of misspent money and the lies that were told to the Haitian people, all the money that went to Friends of Bill for contracts and nothing got done down there. People are dying in Haiti and the Clintons are dining out on the money from donors. I mean, it's pretty sick.
So when you think of what the rule of law and administration of justice is supposed to look like, how does what we're seeing stand up against what the ideal is?
The ideal of the rule of law is, of course, the cornerstone of American life. We're different even than Europe in the sense that we took the best ideas of Europe, put them into our Constitution, a written Constitution, and made the rule of law part of our fabric. The reason people have trouble in China is because they don't have contracts in China. They don't have a rule of law. They're just beginning to develop one. We have all those things in this country, That's why people come here. People are not leaving the United States. They're not screaming to get out of America. They're screaming to get in. And one of the reasons they get in is the rule of law. We have a court system that works. We allegedly have honest people running the system. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. That's why the corrosive effect of what Comey has done, along with Loretta Lynch, the Attorney General, in such a flippant way, is extremely destructive of that part of our fabric as a constitutional democracy. And I fear that what they have done is they've created a cynicism about the rule of law that is very, very dangerous. I hear them whining about Trump saying the election's going to be rigged. Well, I've got news for them. He may be right in the sense that because of illegal voting, of dead people voting, because of the way Comey and Loretta Lynch conducted the investigation, people are cynical. They're doubtful. Why shouldn't the American people be worried about the legitimacy of an election when one of the highest law enforcement officers in the country, James Comey, the director of the FBI, goes in public and lies about the reasons for what he did? And if that doesn't create cynicism about the rule of law, I don't know what does. The biggest single contributor to cynicism about this election is James Comey.